I think I always had a notion that the land was everything, you know, it was ever since I've been very little. And then an opportunity came up and I was really privileged to be able to build a home. But that carried with it a lot of responsibility. And at the same time, I was also writing for a magazine called Monday Magazine, and the publisher, editor, was a guy called James McKinnon, who wrote a really influential book called 100 Mile Diet. The premise of the book was he was trying to live on food that had been gathered from 100 miles to reduce carbon emissions from transport. So it was right around that time I thought, well, we should be building 100-mile houses too. That when you do actually use local materials, you don't have container ships coming from Norway or China or whatever. So that's the first big thing, is that you've got reduced emissions. And I was just super lucky. There was 4 local guys that live within 100 meters of where I live, young builders, really principled, that wanted to be recognized for their craftsmanship. And I thought, okay, I got a little bit of money, so I'll build small but really well. And we are going to have a principle of trying to do as much as we can using materials that have been gathered from 100 miles. It opened up an amazing experience, because all your decision making is completely different. You don't just trot down to hardware stores or whatever. You do still have to go to them, but as a principle, trying to avoid them in order to find things locally opens up all these possibilities. Finding little local suppliers of things, finding craftspeople that make things, recycling, finding recycled things, salvaging. Did a lot of salvaging. So for example, the roof on this house is slate. I mean, that's not a local material, but it was slate that had been salvaged off Fort Victoria by my grandfather. He'd put it on his house. When his house had been demolished by a developer, that slate had been salvaged. And, you know, it raised all these questions in my mind about why are we continually destroying houses, and why are we not looking at long-term cost savings of building very, very well the first time, so that we're building, so it's not only a 100-mile house, I wanted to build a 100-year house. And so that started the 100-mile house idea. In a way, the layout of the house was designed by my youngest, who told me, he said, "Mommy, our family is happiest when we're all in a tent," because they love going camping and all being together in this tent and chatting at night. So I kind of went, okay, well, let's sort of see how we can replicate it. What do we have here? Probably 1,000 square feet. So I have a little tiny utility room, but the rest of the house is almost all open plan. So it adapts for dining, living, cooking. Got a library / guest bedroom, and then water closet, you know, toilet separated from bath, an extra sink, and then an upstairs loft and living area and studio. And then I've got this beautiful outside room that I sleep in from May till October, which is just next to my kitchen garden. So one of the things I'd say about doing 100-mile house is that it's also, it enriches your life because everything suddenly has a story. So for example, there was a church that was being renovated, and they were pulling up all their old floorboards that were 150 years around, and you're sitting on floorboards that have been preyed upon, and, you know, christenings and marriages and all that energy tied up in that church you're sitting on, right? So what happened is that we went down to the church, we pulled up those floorboards, and then we salvaged them by putting them through planes, which isn't that much extra work. And then we laid down these boards, and these are beautiful floorboards. My ceiling is all made from an old sawmill. It's a bigger, broader plank. It's got kind of an industrial feel to it. It's got a lot of texture. It's kind of got a lot of stories to it. You can see the hobnail boots of the men that walked across it. All the insulation is recycled. all the beams, there was a driveway that we had to make, and so all the beams in the house come from trees that have just been locally milled that were going to come down or had come down in windfalls. There was all sorts of cool things like wainscoting we got from houses that were being renovated. All the sinks, the old sinks and bathtubs all came from renovations. Building with cedar, you have to really think about where's that cedar coming from. Is it sustainable? So I have a friend who has a salvage, a tugboat and a salvage operation, and there is billions of red cedars lying on the beaches up and down the coast from here to Alaska. So he salvaged the red cedar and the yellow cedar off the beaches, and then we milled it, and so any cedar in this house is all salvaged. So another really important part of the 100-mile house is that there's no paint, there's no solvents, there's no varnishes. Everything that I used in terms of treatment is with waxes, oils, and when I say varnishes, no kind of plastic. And all these, the pigment in this is just earth pigments mixed in. So the walls, it's just a screed, and inside the walls is just insulation. We tried to reduce the concrete as much as possible by adding fly ash, which is a recycled product, and then it's local sand. So you've reduced your amount of cement and bulked it out with fly ash. There was a lot of things that we couldn't do 100 mile. For example, under building regs, you have to use concrete in your floor slabs. In many instances, we were just trying to lessen our impact through the 100-mile idea. So I don't know if you could do everything if you want to keep electrical fixtures and that sort of thing, but we did the best we could. My sister shares the land and built her own little cabin, and then we built 2 little tiny houses. So those little tiny houses are just sleeping only areas, and I always have tenants or my kids or whoever, so they've got somewhere independent place to just live, but all of our living goes on in this house, so we share cooking and the warmth and the heat and all the services. And it's a slightly different take on communal living, but it means that, you can provide more space for young people, and you get this intergenerational mix, which I love. The other thing I was wanting, because water's so precious here, was a system where I could be recycling my gray water and my black water. The gray and black waters basically filter out. It's a drip filtration system that then goes into a little tiny well that pumps into pipes that water the vegetable garden. And then I have water catchment off my roof. And the slate roof is the best for water catchment. I just have barrels, you can see the barrels. My water's from a well. Everybody on the island receives water, either surface water from lakes or deep water from aquifers, which is what we call well water. We put on solar panels, we did the sort of usual thing, solar hot water heaters. I live in a forest, so I sort of mimic a forest fire, and I remove maybe 1 or 2 cubic meters a year, and I run a really efficient wood stove to heat this house, and putting in passive solar walls that really absorb the heat and hold the heat. And they also absorb the cool and keep it cool in the summer. If I had to make a recommendation for alternative building is to try and get it into the kind of mainstream thinking that we don't have to build so big. And when you start thinking about building smaller, you build with quality, not quantity. Without the natural world, we're nothing. And I realize that we know everything we need to know right now in order to act. We know how bad it is. We know what we need to do. And so in the last 6 years, I've been working on several books that are really about how we engage with the natural world, what an amazing teacher the natural world is. And I've also spent a lot of time with an Hanaxiala elder called Cecil Paul, who has, you know, these wonderful metaphors that he thinks are really important for us in this time. And one of them is the idea of what he calls the magic canoe, which is we are all in a canoe right now, and we are paddling up some pretty treacherous waters. And whether we are going to get to our destination or not is going to depend upon us getting as many people in that canoe as possible, working together with our different skills to paddle, and that we're paddling all in the same direction.
Please share this video if you liked it. Also, be sure to subscribe to Exploring Alternatives and check out our playlists for more stories like this. Thanks for watching.